As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History.
Welcome back. As we continue to celebrate America's 250th birthday, we're sharing our We the People series, including This Day in History.
Yeah, here's our chief meteorologist, Charlie Shortino, with This Day in History.
Hello again. On this day, July 26th, back in 1775, the U.S. Postal System was established, with Benjamin Franklin serving as the first Postmaster General of the United Colonies. It was established by the Continental Congress. During early colonial times in the 1600s, few American colonists needed to send mail to each other. It was more likely that their correspondence was with letter writers in Britain. Mail deliveries from across the Atlantic were sporadic and could take many months to arrive. There were no post offices in the colonies, so mail was typically left at inns and taverns. Franklin held the job for about a year until he was sent to France as a diplomat. He left vastly improved mail system with routes from Florida to Maine and regular service between the colonies and Britain. President George Washington appointed Samuel Osgood, a former Massachusetts congressman, as the first Postmaster General of the American nation under the new U.S. Constitution in 1789. At the time, there were approximately 75 post offices in the country. Today, the United States has more than 40,000 post offices, and the Postal Service delivers more than 200 billion pieces of mail each year to more than 144 million homes and businesses. That's This Day in History for July 26th. For We the People, I'm Charlie Shortino.